Well, welcome everyone to ColliTalks Transformative Conversations. And as you know, we go deep. Collie goes deep because that's the only way I know how to live life is to find the truth, to find the roots of things so that people who listen, they can just breathe and go, oh, wow, okay, that's cool. So today I'm honored to be joined by a woman who has spent decades shaping the stories of others only to find herself living a story of unexpected reinvention. And I am talking reinvention here. So, Stacey, you have been the voice of newsrooms, a mentor to the next generation, and still continue to do that. And you're currently walking a path of deliberate pivot. You also have
Yes.
a beautiful heart for rescuing animals, kitty cats. And I'm so excited to dive into your journey. So, welcome, Stacey Commer. Right?
Thank you.
I got your name
Yes, you
right.
got it right.
I
You got it
did.
right.
So, welcome,
Thank you.
darling. Welcome. Stacey and I have known each other for numerous years, and
Mhm.
I'm like I say, I'm completely honored to be with you. I just adore you, so I'm so excited. So, I was going to ask you.
Mm.
Your podcast, Unexpected Journeys, highlights how people navigate the unknown, right? So
Yeah,
when
things that
yeah,
have happened to them basically that they
yeah,
that had not expected.
yeah, and when the TV station that you poured your heart and your whole life into really was
Mhm.
canceled, what was the very first emotion that you felt? And how did you begin to decouple your identity from that news director role?
Well, I knew you would start out with the tough, hard question, of course, first. First of all, though, but thank you for having me. I do
Oh,
very much appreciate telling my story and chatting with you. And
mm.
also, that you're going to do the same for me. You're going to be on my podcast. So I'm very
Yeah.
happy about that. But in answer to your question, Collie, it was such a shock. It was something where, as you know, in the media industry, there have been mass layoffs that have been happening for a long time. But myself and the staff at the TV station, we'd been cut back. There were only 6 of us in the newsroom by the time this happened, but
Wow.
we never it was always the more with less, right?
Right.
And we never ever thought a local television station, small TV station was going to be touched, honestly. We thought we're here to provide this service to the community and, it's something that is valued, and we just none of us ever thought that the station would ever go the way that it did. And yeah, unfortunately, it was just over a year ago. It was May 13th of 2025 that we were all called to a town hall meeting. And basically, in less than 5 minutes, we were told our careers were over. And it was a case of it was 10 in the morning. They said, we have officials from the company came in, said, we've just closed down. The TV stations are dark. We've shut them down and we just couldn't do it financially. And so it was all of us in one room, those who were
Ah,
losing jobs and those who were not, because it was a TV and radio station together, which my opinion should not have been done that way. I think we should have at least had the dignity of doing it separately
ah,
and, saying having those private conversations with us, right? So it was not only a shock to us, but to the people who were staying behind. A lot of us had worked together in some cases for decades, and you're
mm,
just told in 5 minutes everything is done. And so there were people crying, there were people who were angry, as you can imagine. And
shock.
yeah, and as you said, Collie, this was a small station where so many people over the years, I mean, it had been in the community 60 years,
Ah,
and so many great broadcasters got their start here. We were, a funnel basically from Nate and Edmonton.
mhm.
We would have had thousands of students doing practicums over the years. Lots of them ended up getting hired and then, of course, moving on. There's still people who worked in Lloydminster. You can find them in newsrooms across the country. And
Mm,
it was just such a shock. And then, of course, it's a shock for me because I've
mhm.
been doing it at like almost 36 years at that point in different communities. I started in Swift Current. I also worked in Saskatoon and Edmonton and 3 different times in Lloydminster, back and forth in different roles. But then, of
Wow.
course, I had my young staff
Mhm.
that of course, my thoughts went to them too, because now where are they going to go? It's really difficult to move from a small station to say work all of a sudden at a CTV Edmonton, right? Like it's
Oh, for
pretty much
sure.
unheard of.
Yeah.
And they had, most of them 1, 2 years in the industry, maybe not even 2 years. So now where do they go? And of course, they're upset. And, lucky most of them have been resilient and have found something else, but it was difficult for a lot of them, Collie. There are a couple staff members and, I'm not going to say any names, but
No,
they
no.
really, really struggled
Of
and are still
course.
struggling because of the way it was handled, right? Like, it's such and it's a public thing too. If you work at, say, a bank or,
Mhm.
you get laid off or maybe you're in the trades, it's
Right.
not made public. But then, of
No.
course, when it happened here, then, of course, it's public, and literally, when the word got out, I was getting phone calls within an hour of when it happened, and I was like, I can't talk right now. I just I don't even know how to feel." And, what do? You got your stuff years of stuff is in your office,
Mhm.
and, yeah, of course, there's people trying to console me, trying to console the staff, and, "Oh, what's your next move? How do you find" you there's so many things that you start thinking of at one time because
Wow.
it had never happened to me. In 36 years, I had never been laid off, and I'd always worked for a company. So I
Mhm.
didn't I didn't know what the next move was gonna be. I'm not in a city where there is a lot of opportunity to do what I was doing in broadcasting. We were the
Right.
only television station. Now I do have radio background, but again, the radio stations here, well, first of all, one of them was owned by the company that shut the TV stations down, and the other one is a small station, great station, but they have, the staff that they need basically as well, right? It's not like they
Right.
have a whole bunch of new opportunities. So, yeah, it's still even over a year later, I don't feel like I have my footing.
Right.
When you do something for that long, it's
Mhm.
really, really difficult to make the changes and know what you're supposed to do.
Oh, yeah, that's why I say, how did you begin to decouple your identity? Because it is you were the news director and you worked your way through and up to that. And I know because I've been to your station, I've watched you interview. You're brilliant and you're, exceptional at what you do. I was in the media in Toronto with CTV, so I know media people and I know and I knew you were and still are an amazing person as well as what you did was brilliant. And so, oh my God, how did you decouple your identity?
Well, I don't know that I have, to be honest with you.
Right?
I was so attached to doing that for so long, and I'm thankful because I have been asked, like, for example, this past week and, the year prior, there was a local broadcaster here who was also laid off, or actually it was around the COVID times from the radio station,
Right?
and he has his own it's an internet broadcasting show. So he asked me to co-host the parade broadcast with him, which is, it's so much fun to be back in there.
Mhm.
I did take probably about a month before I really started doing, any serious looking. At first it was panic because the first thing you think of is, oh my God, financial, right? How am I
Yeah.
going to do this? Where do I go? And I was very surprised at the people who offered support, but I was equally surprised at the people who didn't offer support.
Mhm.
And was this one fellow who he had worked at the station. I'd worked with him, I don't know, it was I think my first time around, so it would have been in the late '90s,
Mhm.
and he emailed me and he said, like, he lives about 45 minutes from here and said, works for a different radio station now in sales. And he said, I went through this with a different company. He said, It's really hard to explain over email, but how about I come down, we go for a coffee, and I tell you what I've experienced and what I did." And I thought, okay, that's a great, great thing to do. And I'm
Yeah.
so thankful for that because knowing what he experienced, it's if you haven't been through it, you don't know. And the
No.
feelings that you have, you don't quite understand it. So to have him put it in perspective for me, and he
Mhm.
talked about, like, his family, and he had young kids at the time, and they're like, "Oh, dad, are we gonna lose our house?" So you have all these questions surrounding your family too, but he talked about what he did to get back on his feet, and I was like, "Okay, this makes a lot of sense," and a lot of it is networking, and it's contacting, reaching out to people that you know. He
Mhm.
told me everything that he had done, and so the again, taking time to figure out what I was going to do, and luckily, I've been in this community long enough that a lot of people know me, and so
Oh,
that
for
presented
sure.
some opportunities. So, the first thing was a broadcaster from Edmonton has started a company about 3 years ago where she goes into schools and she teaches public speaking,
Oh,
courses for kids.
okay.
And so, basically, there's a lot of especially younger people that have lost that art of communication.
Yes.
And so she has developed a program, and it's such a good program, and she basically helps kids, come out of their shell and teach them how to be confident communicators, and it's not just students, it's corporate to, as well. And so
Right.
we had chatted back and forth a little bit. I'd reached out to her, and she said, "I think you'd be really good, given the broadcasting background. And so how about we try it in Lloydminster and in Saskatchewan and see, how it works." So I had to learn how to set up my own business because you have to do it as an independent contractor,
Oh, yeah.
which, oh my gosh,
Oh my
what
gosh.
like, what a learning curve because I'd always worked for somebody.
Mhm.
So GST number, PST number, registering your business. What's the name going to be? Taxes. And thank heavens I have a really good accountant who was able to set me straight, like right from the beginning to know what I was supposed to do. But I started working for them as an independent contractor, and it's still one of the things I'm doing. So I'll go into
Oh.
schools and do the, teach the kids the public speaking, universities and some corporate clients as well. But the thing is with that, it's great, but it's also it's not consistent, right? You have to find the clients, and it's a one off. So when
Mhm.
you've talked to one grade in a school, then you have to try and get everybody else too. So I've done some stuff in Saskatoon, which has
Oh,
been awesome,
okay.
in North Battleford. So
Awesome.
yeah, yeah, kind of going all over with that. And
Mhm.
then the fellow who publishes, it's kind of a community newspaper here, reached out to me, and he's like, we really would like to. He'd only owned the paper for, I think, 6 or 7 months at the time. And he said, we'd really like your advice on how we can turn it into almost a Reader's Digest style of like a community magazine. And
Oh,
so I'm a consultant with them now. And so I've been doing that since January. And then the podcast that I've started as well.
yes.
And then I've also partnered with another lady because I did back to school. I took an online course through Western University for crisis communications. So I've
Oh.
earned that criteria now as well. I can teach crisis communications to businesses as well. So, how do you make a plan for
Mhm.
something, if there's a social media rumor that goes sideways, or if you have mass layoffs or a product recall or a natural disaster, right? How do you create a team and have it a team in place ahead of time. So when something happens, you're not being reactive, right? And I
Right.
think a lot of
Yep.
even smaller, and it's small to medium businesses that I work with, and I think a lot of them think, "Oh, well, we won't ever have the
Yeah,
disaster,"
right.
but, anything can happen, and, you said you worked in news. You've seen small communities,
Yep.
2,500, 3,000 people even, something happens, all of a sudden they're in the national media spotlight, and
Absolutely.
that's really tough
Yep.
if you're having to deal with that from a reactive side of things.
Oh,
So,
ugh.
yeah, so I've added that as well, and then as I said, the podcast, I'm hoping that, we get lots of listeners and subscribers and that works out as well. So I'm doing some consulting, I'm doing some freelance writing. So it's been a
It's
tough crawl, and I'm still, I think in my mind, Collie, I'm still the broadcaster. I still feel like I work at the television station,
mhm.
and I don't know, they say once a journalist, always a journalist, and I
Yeah.
don't know if I will ever get out of that mode. Like, I don't see me sitting behind a desk and, being in an administrative role or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's why I started the podcast because I miss doing the interviews and I miss
Oh,
telling
yeah.
stories and I miss talking.
And
So,
you're
yeah.
brilliant at it, and it
Well,
will be
thank
a
you.
huge success because, I'm thinking of just to reflect about, in my own work, I see many people held back by what I work with a lot are called hidden loyalties to their past, right? A
Right.
and in your career as a news director, you had the final word on so many stories. So, like, what was the hardest part for you
Mhm.
of letting go of that authority so that you could step into the unknown?
Well, like I said to you, Collie, I honestly, I don't think that I fully have.
Yeah.
It's only been a year, and a year is a long time, but it's also not a long time.
No.
And I still, even the roles that I get into,
Mhm,
I go into it with the authority of being a news director,
mhm,
and, maybe that's a good thing, maybe it's not, I'm not sure, but I've always just been a person that has just taken the lead. I can't sit back and let things happen, and that's probably a good thing in this case
mhm.
because I just, I didn't wait and hope that something would come to me for a job offer. I was out there, and I did apply for a couple of other jobs, marketing and such, and did interviews and didn't get them. But I also think I wouldn't have been happy in those roles
No,
anyways.
no.
Yeah, so it's yeah, an identity associated with, work is a really difficult thing,
Mhm.
especially, like I said, when it's been something you've done for most of your life. I graduated high school a year early and thus went to college early. And so I had my first job in news because it was only a year-long course, the broadcasting course at the time in
Wow.
Saskatoon. So I
Okay.
was 18 years old when I had my first news job, and through it was in Swift Current, but through default, about a year and a bit later, I was news director. So at 19.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Yeah, and I look back now, what was I even doing? I don't even know how I to live my life properly at 19.
Yeah, but you
it's just
did.
the way, yeah, and it's just the way that things happened, and so, yeah, I don't know that I'll ever be able to shed that
Mhm.
identity. I
Mhm.
guess maybe if I was to win the lottery and move to an island somewhere where I didn't have to worry about things, then, that might change, but yeah.
You'd probably start a station on the island.
Well, and I'm not one of these people that can sit still, and I
No.
had a lady say to me the other day, she's like, "Oh my gosh, it's like, how are you doing all these different things?" And I said, "Well, it's a lot of different things, but again, it's not consistent. It's not
Right.
full time, right?
Right.
So, even the podcast, I've done, I think, 20 some interviews because I want to get them done ahead of time and then I'll just be able to schedule them, right? So,
Mhm.
again, that's a one off. So I won't have to worry about it for a few months. And,
Exactly.
the schools are quiet for the summer now. So I don't, that doesn't pick up again until September. And then I'm
Right.
doing some freelance things. But again, it's just all the one offs. So would I like something consistent? Absolutely, but it also needs to be something I enjoy. I mean, I'm 55 now, and that's the other thing I worry about, Collie, honestly, is ageism.
Mm.
And it's a real thing.
Oh, it
And
is.
yeah, and I wondered when I've applied for some jobs. I mean, employers can't technically ask you how old you are, but they can tell by looking at your history,
Yeah,
right?
your
You know
experience, right? It's like,
exactly.
"What?"
Yes. Yeah. So, and I know that sometimes there's a thought process out there that, oh, well, we get the young people in, they know technology and but they're also not gonna stay with a company for, you know, maybe even 2 or 3 years, right?
Yeah,
Because they want to move on and advance.
exactly.
Whereas with somebody like me, I'm in the point in my life where I would love to get into a place with solid footing, and I give them a decade of employment, right? So,
Mhm, mhm.
but yeah, ageism is definitely a thing too. I'm not saying the people that I, had the interviews with that was the case, but the more and more investigating I do and speak to others who are kind of in the same space,
Yeah.
it's a thing for sure.
Oh, yes. We can talk about that tomorrow
Yeah.
on yeah. Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yes, exactly.
But today is about you, and I was gonna say, you've spent 35 or 36 plus years, right?
Yep.
Approving approving scripts and conducting interviews, and how has the way you listen to people's stories, right, changed, or has it for you now that you are on the other side of the desk, helping others to, find their voices, especially
Mhm.
at Project 5, right?
Yeah. It's a little different in that when I was in the news director role and working with a lot of younger people, a lot of it was, showing them, they take the schooling and they come out with an idea of how things are supposed to be in the journalism world, but
Mhm.
it's never how it actually goes, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
When you're telling someone stories, there's certain things you always want to try to get the personal angle and try and get that in there. Whereas, if there's a news conference and say with some government officials, they want you to get their message. It's all spun. The interviews are going to be the same answers no matter what.
Right.
And what I would like to try and show the employees was, okay, we've got a government announcement, but how does it affect us here? How does it affect certain people in the community, right? So take that personalization and bring it in, right? So that was
Mhm.
kind of the biggest lesson.
Okay.
And now uh, it's such a different thing because if I'm going into schools and I'm coaching kids or whatever the case is, it's about how to speak up, how to use that voice to, first of all, not be shy when people, I think a lot of people think that they're judged when you're speaking publicly. And when I can show in a school that everybody is on the same level, right? It's the same, you're all experiencing the same feelings. There's a lot of anxiety sometimes
Mhm.
with kids, and if I can show that, hey, everybody's feeling the same thing and this is how you can use your voice and give them the tips and get them to a point where, it's rewarding to me when they come up afterwards and say, "Oh my gosh," either I was so shy at the beginning and I didn't
Right.
want to say anything to, we have them do a presentation at the end and they absolutely rock it, right?
Mhm.
Or we will have sometimes the teachers will say to us, "We have some kids who are really super shy and they might not be willing to come up," and we never make anybody at the end do the presentation. They do the work and they build it. But
Okay.
if they're very uncomfortable, then they don't have to. But
Right.
we have had situations where those kids that they have had said, they might have a little bit of an issue coming forward, they're the first ones to ask to do the speech at the end. So it's just,
Wow.
yeah, it's so rewarding to see that. And so
Yeah.
it's a different way of coaching things, right? On that
Right.
side,
Mhm.
that way is more, it's more personalized. It's more, how do we get each individual to the place they want to go? Whereas
Mhm.
in news, it was more, this is getting people to tell their stories,
Right.
whereas in news, I was taking the stories that were told and how do we make sure it gets out in the best light? And
Right.
and I think the one thing that people don't realize about small stations, Collie, is that, you know, after COVID happened, we were often getting looped in with the what they call, the mainstream media, and, you guys are lying, or the government is buying the news station, and you're saying whatever they want. And, we
Wow.
were doing stories on community fundraisers and city council, and, it's not opinion pieces. And unfortunately, people watch American, and I use the term news loosely because down there, obviously, it's more opinions, and that does happen down there. I'm sure
Yeah.
in the smaller stations, maybe it doesn't, but what we're fed up here and what we see is, it's very, very different from what you see if you watch an American news station. And
Oh.
we were just not like that. But our staff would go out and they would come back discouraged because somebody will have made a comment or, yelled at them because they think that we're associated with a
Mhm.
bigger media channel that was out to get the negative side of the story. But like I said, our stories were about promoting the community, about, people doing good in the community and telling their stories. And
Mhm.
it's so, so unfortunate that that has disappeared now. And then it was like literally 3 weeks after us, the TV station in Medicine Hat was closed down. Same thing, small
Right.
community, all of those employees laid off. And now there's a city of, I think it's about 60,000 with no local voice. And
Unreal.
so we're losing people who were keeping others accountable, and not
Mhm.
just that, but telling great community stories and talking about the great things that were happening in the community. So when I was the news director, back to the original question, the
Mhm.
vision was, how do we tell these stories, and how do we find the stories in the community, the good stories? We were
Right.
never out to dig anybody or, get the National Enquirer version of things. It was always about being, that good community steward, right? So
Right. Yeah.
it's unfortunate that that's gone, and it's yeah, it's just two different things being in, a news person, and then, like I said, working with people, and even the corporate people I work with.
Mhm.
I am always surprised, Collie, at the end when they do their presentations, just how when you give them the tools
Mhm.
and they realize how they can use them to build this preparation and then take it into the real world, it's just awesome.
Wow.
It's rewarding that way, and I'm so
Yeah.
glad that I've found this project so that I can still
Yeah.
have that feeling and still, be so happy with what I'm doing. But like I said at the beginning, Collie, once a journalist, always a journalist, and so
Oh, for
that'll
sure.
never
That'll
disappear.
never no, and, it's really interesting because just the fact that those stations have done what they've done, you know, it is it is really sad actually because the word community, I mean, communities are disappearing. And the whole thing about community is that you know the workings of your community and how to be, stay. I mean, I did a mini MBA, right? And I
Mhm.
remember the professor saying, with regards to even a small city or a small town, if the small area of the downtown core is not user friendly, like if they don't have a store where people can get
Mhm.
food downtown or,
Yep.
that it, the community disperses. It's no longer a community. You can't have
Yep.
community without that kind of community.
Yep.
And so, when you have like my brother lives in Medicine Hat, he was distraught when
Mhm.
that station closed. It was like, what the hell? Where are we going to find out what's going on, how it's going on
Yep.
without trying to find it through Dr. Google. And now it's, chat
Is it
who or
even true?
whatever, or is it
Yeah,
even true, right?
yeah.
Yeah, so community and yeah, and so it's really disheartening that that's all gone the way it has, right?
Well,
And
on the other side of that, colleague, too, is things like, for example, you and I were talking before we went on about the
mhm,
massive storms that moved
mhm,
through the area. So before, we had the TV and radio stations with live people, and, if there was an alert, it came across the
yep,
TV, or we'd get it out on social media right away because we were always front lines and
right,
there to make sure. Like, we had a tornado hit 20 minutes south of here last night, and I
crazy.
could hardly find anything on the local media that's left here posted, right? So we were good for that sort of thing. And I hate to say it, colleague, but at some point that is going to come back and hurt the community because something terrible is going to happen. There's
Mhm,
not going to be warning.
yep,
Even I saw comments last night on social media. Well, where are you seeing this about the tornado? Where are you seeing the weather watches? Some people don't know where to find that. And especially we would find older people in the
oh,
community
yeah,
loved watching our broadcast
of
because that's how they
course,
caught up on what was happening locally. The weather and the agriculture news obviously was super popular. We focused on local sports
mhm,
because that's the other thing is a lot of the bigger stations now are just focusing on the major teams. So you're not
mhm,
going to see, your grandson who hit a home run at T-ball or, your granddaughter who scored a goal in hockey. Like you're not
right,
going to see that anywhere unless you're actually there. And,
no,
we would do things like athlete of the week. So we would pick an athlete that maybe normally wouldn't get attention and show them, in a spotlight
oh,
on television. So all that
yeah,
is gone now. And going back to the thing about the weather, it is very unfortunate, but at some point
yep,
these closures are going to result in I don't want to say a major disaster, but it could very well be
very
that if
possible,
people yeah, if people don't know what's going on or know where to going on, what to get the information, like we talked about being reactive.
right,
In some situations, it's going to cost you if you have to be reactive. So,
mhm,
yeah,
mhm,
and taking away these local stations, it's done that. It's taken away one of the outlets.
it's
I would
tragic,
say, yeah, major outlets
yeah.
that could have given that information all in one place.
Yeah, it's tragic because I think in terms of people, seniors, it's bad enough now having to have a phone and a computer to get into
Yeah.
your bank account, to do this,
Yeah.
to do that. But let alone for them, for some of them, that was allowing them to keep sane and
Yes.
to feel that they belonged. And also too, to stay like, what if a tornado sweeping through and
Yeah.
they couldn't see it on the news to go to a shelter, to
Yeah.
go to a rec center, or to go somewhere for cover. They wouldn't even know.
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
would
or
not even know.
or there's an outbreak of something,
Yeah.
and I still get and it particularly, it seems to be a lot of the, older group of people who remember me from being
Mhm,
on television and radio.
mhm.
If I'm out shopping or, whatever, who will come up to me and talk about how much the TV station meant to them, and a lot of them had been watching since, inception, where they had
Wow.
live children's shows on the air, right? And it's just something that they really, really miss.
Mhm,
And it's hard to explain how the corporate system works,
mhm.
and that's where I think things started to go sideways was when big corporations thought they wanted to run television and radio stations, but it comes down to accountants, and they look at the bottom line, and they don't look at what service they're doing for the community, and it just, "Okay, well, we're cutting here, cutting here, cutting here," till there's by the time when we were still on the air, and I told you we had a staff of 6 people,
Yeah,
well, their day consisted of reporting their story, going out, then editing that same story, then not only getting it into our system, but then they
right,
also anchored the news or the sports or the weather for 3 different newscasts. And this is all in one day for each person, right?
right.
So, it was and they were awesome at it. And they knew it was a lot of work, but we had a system down and they loved it.
They
That's the thing
loved it.
about journalism is even though they were being literally worked to the bone, they still gave it
Loved
their
it.
all the time, yeah,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
it's so sad that these big corporations have done what they have done. I mean, we've just seen it again recently this past week with Rogers Sports Media
Mm.
shutting down, all their or not all, but 6 of their AM stations, and I think 230 people out of work, and, but then they spend 45 billion, I think it was, on acquiring the sports some sort of sports, I
Yeah, they
can't
took over everything
exactly
from
yeah, in
CBC,
Toronto.
right? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so It's just again, it's so disheartening because of the fact that, again, it's the small towns and the small communities that lose out.
Oh,
And not
yeah.
knocking the remaining media that are in these small
No,
communities,
no.
but when you lose an entity that has, like, 2 television stations and we also supplied the news for the radio station, it's
Yeah.
just not the same.
No, absolutely not. I was gonna ask you now, I know from posts that I've seen,
Yeah.
that you've had a few, I would say, setbacks health-wise too, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so yeah, and, if you're open to sharing, I was,
Yeah.
gonna, just ask you how your experience with your own health and the transformation, how it mirrors kinda like the internal work that you've had to do, you know, to professionally
Yeah.
reinvent yourself, 'cause, you're having to work through your own health stuff as well, right?
Yeah. Well, that is an interesting question. Just had knee surgery again here back in March, and this is my 15th knee surgery.
What?
So, yes, yeah. I started the first one I had was back in 1989, and, it just led to some other problems. I was in a very bad accident as well about 10 years ago,
Oh my
and
god.
it wreaked havoc on what I had done in my knee already, and so this time it was before when I had a replacement done, it was just the small parts, so, like, the kneecap and then, parts that were maybe a few centimeters long, but this
Right?
time it's a full rod that is from my kneecap almost to my ankle,
Oh
and
my
then from the
word.
top of my kneecap almost to my hip. So this is supposed to do me for, pretty much the rest of my life now, but it was at a time and before if I had to take time off work, I got paid, I was salaried, right? So
Right.
now I was off, I was almost 2 months and I couldn't work, and so I didn't get paid, right? So,
Right.
you have the added stress. First of all, you're trying to recover.
Mhm.
Secondly, you also have to go to all these physio appointments and, everything else and find a way to get around because I couldn't drive for, a bit. And then
No.
so you have to take cabs, which is not only cost, but then you have to find a cab where you can get the driver who's going to be able to get you in and out successfully because you
Right?
can't sit in a small seat because you can't bend properly, right?
Ouch. Oh,
So,
oh.
yeah, so
Yeah.
there was a lot of stress associated with that, and then the stress on top of that of trying to do some work, but then I couldn't sit at my laptop and my desk because, again, you can't bend properly. You have to do these exercises. I was on so much medication
Oh,
that it was a struggle, but it was at the point where if I didn't get it done, by the time that we had done the X-rays, I guess it was a couple of months ago. Oh, they think what had happened was when I was in the accident and I had been hit from behind by a big truck, it had loosened the parts,
oh my
and
god.
so you could see in the X-ray that part of the and if anybody's medically squeamish, they should probably not listen further, but part of the rod that was in the bone initially had come out. So you could
Oh,
see it was about 2 centimeters out of the bone, and so my knee was in essence collapsing. The parts were collapsing on each other, and so I'd been in constant pain for 2 years, not
oh,
knowing
girl.
what had happened, what was happening, and then and the regular X-rays didn't really show it, but this new surgeon that I had, he had me take these X-rays, and I'm telling you, like, there was, like, X-ray squatting and, like, all these different positions, and when you see the X-rays he did, you can clearly see how that pin was coming out, and so if I didn't have this surgery, my knee would have collapsed on itself, and that would have been a whole other
Oh my
thing because
god.
I didn't want to have it because I didn't wanna take the time away because I'm still in that mode where I have to be making, earning
Yeah.
financially and all of that, but if I didn't and it had gone out on its own, then who knows? I might not have gotten the right surgeon, it might not have been the right repairs, and, kudos to my new surgeon from Saskatoon, he did an amazing job, and I talk about how long the steel rod or the titanium rods are in there now,
Mhm.
but my recovery was the best recovery that I have ever had from a knee surgery.
Really?
Granting that, you expect certain amounts of pain and that sort of
Oh,
thing
for
too, but
sure.
his regimen and the way he does things was just made the recovery so much better. It was still a
Wow.
long time. I'm still in physio. Like, it still takes some
Yeah.
time to
Yeah.
do it, but yeah, it was a struggle because your body is gonna do what your body is going to do,
Mhm.
and I couldn't be out in schools doing presentations or
No way.
anywhere because A, I couldn't drive, and B, I couldn't carry things or even walk properly without pain. So, there was a lot of stress associated, and there's still a lot of stress associated,
Oh, for sure.
until I can get to that point where I feel like I'm comfortable and have, all my ducks in a row. And so but yeah, when injuries like that happen or you have to deal with it, you have to do what you have to do, right?
Right.
So yeah, I
Wow.
I went ahead with the surgery and it's been a lifelong thing basically dealing with all of the different issues with my knees, but
Mhm.
now I'm hoping we're on track and we don't have to, take things anything further. So,
Wow,
but yeah, it's
amazing.
just well, and it's stress upon stress, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
and then of course you start getting run down and tired and then you start thinking, well, you know, is it past the point? Am I expired now, right? Like, is my expiry date past because before people always knew me from the television station, but have they forgotten now? You get those
Mhm.
thoughts going through your mind,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
and then it's like, okay, well, my skills, are they transferable? Am I going to if I go into a new job, am I gonna be a failure because I don't have the training in marketing or whatever it is? Now, I did talk to a bunch of people because if you know me, Collie, I do my research on everything.
Yes.
And so I talked to many people who were former journalists and are in communications, and they all said, "You would not believe how your skills are so transferable and make you so valuable to an organization." And
Mhm.
even though they said that, it's still tough for me to believe, right? Because you get in that mode where you're stuck
Yeah.
and you think that it's the what ifs, right? What if I'm a failure? What if I get in there and they're like, "Oh, we've hired the girl from the TV station," and then the girl from the TV station falls on her butt because she doesn't know what she's doing, So there's always
Mhm.
these things
Mhm.
going
Yep.
through my mind, and I've tried to be positive and, try to keep those thoughts coming, but then there's certain things that happen, and I probably shouldn't take some things as personally as I do, but it's difficult, right?
Yeah, oh,
So, for
for sure.
example, when you do a pitch to a school and they say, "Well, no, we don't think it's right for us." And I was like, you think, well, in the lady who runs this program, she's booked for 3 years in advance in different schools, so why don't they wanna book me? And you don't go to it. Maybe it's a budgeting thing for them, or maybe they you know what I mean? You go
Right.
to the negative right away, and so
Absolutely.
it's really been hard to get out of that mode too, because of the fact that it seems like it's a personal blow to me every time that happens, if that
Mhm.
probably makes sense to you hearing
Oh,
that.
completely. Well, it's interesting because I was gonna ask you about, because I talk a lot about dismantling the perfectionism trap
Yeah.
and the walls that we build, right? And I mean, come on, in 36 plus years of being in the public eye, I'm sure you have felt the pressure, to be perfect. And so, how did you finally, or have you found ways, because this podcast is all about transformation. So have you
Mhm.
found ways to for yourself to dismantle that perfectionism trap, and maybe for, I say my viewers, but they're
Hmm.
listeners, they're not. They're
Right.
yours, So that can help your audience as well now, kind of go, "Oh, yeah, maybe I could really learn from this woman."
Well, I'm trying, and it's a slow process because of the fact that I was, in charge for so
Mm,
long. And, it's funny, I have a high school friend, and when I started recording the podcast, she's such a like, she's so smart, and she just it has I knew she'd be great input for me just to get feedback. So I sent her the first episode, and I said, "Can you just listen to this and tell me, what you think?" And before she even listened, she replied, "Well, you've always been an overachiever, so I know that it's gonna be good."
yeah.
So, this goes back, like, way, way to high school, and so you
Wow.
think about that, and then, excuse me, think about trying to lose that after the many years that I was and, television is a different thing, right?
Hmm.
It's again, you are in the spotlight, and like I said, when these layoffs happened, of course, it was all public, so everybody is seeing then that you were laid off, whereas
Right.
in a smaller, something else like I talked about, if you're a financial institution or something, it's probably your friends and family would know, but there was a news release issued, from head office talking about what happened, and
Right.
and the mayor is commenting, and the president of the company is commenting, and so you already feel like even though I know it had nothing to do with myself or the staff in the newsroom, you feel like you've let somebody down in a way, and
Mm.
then, it's all coming out publicly as well, right? So,
Mhm. Mhm.
excuse me, I my voice is going here, but
Oh.
I think it's from talking so much from the parade yesterday.
Oh,
But
yeah, that'll do it. Yeah.
but being somebody who, always and I don't expect this from other people, and I have tried to work through this, on my own and dealing with some therapy and such too. I
Mhm.
don't expect perfection out of others, but I am so hard on myself.
Right.
And, even I have no reason to think that this podcast is going to fail. I have no reason to think that based on past history, that I would fail in a different job, but my brain won't let me get away from that.
Right.
And I am doing some work, like I said, I'm trying to think positive about things, and I'm trying to, get a little better at not being so critical. And
Mhm. Mhm.
I will find it, and you probably have dealt with this with some of the people that you work with, Collie, too, is
Yeah.
that they have you get on a good stretch, and then it could even be a small thing that happens, and then you bring yourself right back down,
Oh, yeah,
and
tiny
then you
little
gotta
trigger.
yeah, and then you
Yeah.
have to, claw to work yourself back up to where you were.
Exactly,
So,
right?
yeah, so I'm working on that and trying to figure out how to become better at just realizing that, I'm good at what I do and that I have never or I shouldn't give myself a reason to fail. And I think that maybe what I deem a failure for myself is
Mhm.
probably not if you looked at it from the outside, right? So,
Right,
yeah,
exactly, exactly.
yeah, and it's a lot of work. And like I said, I'm sure you have experiences with people that you work with, but it's hard
Oh,
when
it's
you are
hard.
in
Yeah,
that mode of always trying to be the perfectionist and maintaining that everything you do is, has to be a certain level. It's
absolutely.
yeah, it's hard to back down out of it,
It
right? And
that
we go back, to the original question you asked me, Collie, about identity.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
identity was tied up in being Stacey the journalist or Stacey the news director, right? So it has been a tough
Oh,
thing
absolutely,
to
absolute
shift out of that, right? So
it couldn't
and
not be.
well, and my husband said to me, he said, "You know, I don't know if you know how to be anybody but Stacy the whatever." And he wasn't trying to be mean,
No,
but
no.
he just knows that, I've always been that person that's been out there, and he's the opposite. He's an introvert. So it just even to think of him, if he has to think about doing something in public, he cringes, right? Whereas for
Mhm,
me, I
mhm.
gravitate toward it, right?
Right, yeah.
So, the question is, how do I back off? How do I, maybe tone it down a little bit? How do I take that perfectionism out of everything? So and like I said, it's only been a year, but it's difficult. It's
Oh, for
so
sure.
difficult. It's probably been the hardest thing that I've had to deal with out of everything.
And yet you are transforming it because, I'm just thinking in terms of one thing is like you've received the King Charles III Coronation Medal. Hello,
Yes.
which
Yes.
is a massive honor. And,
Thank you.
what so that recognition, I mean, it has to mean something to you now
Yes.
because looking back at a career that was built on the service of community, how could it not keep you afloat? Because that is huge. I mean, huge.
Yeah, it is, and thank you for saying that, and thank you, it was an honor. I have
Yeah.
it sitting in front of me on my desk to kind of keep me, and it's one of the things that I look at, and it's
Mhm.
like, okay, well, somebody thought obviously that you were valuable enough to get
Hell
this,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, and that's the thing too, is that going back to getting the award for doing what I did, it's
Mhm.
always about promoting other people. It's
Mhm.
not about promoting yourself. And it's funny because you will find a lot of people who work in radio and television who are actually introverts. And, even though what they do is they're, in front of, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of people every day on the news,
Mhm.
they are still very shy. And it's different when you're in a studio with a camera,
Mhm.
one camera person, as opposed to being out and, in front of all those people, right? So, yeah, awards are nice, and it's nothing that I think most people in this industry expect as part of it, but
Right?
it's also nice to know that, and I still to this day, I don't know who nominated me for it, but it's nice to know that somebody thought that what we were doing, and I don't see this again as an individual thing. I talked about this with my staff. I said,
Right?
"This is something where it was because of everything that everybody in the newsroom did, right? Because we were out at all community events and we're meeting people and promoting causes. And so to me, it was a group thing. And it's great that I have it. But, and again, like I said, I look at it here just to remind me that there was whoever nominated me thought that, I was doing a good job. And it is a case of where, I'm honored to get it.
Mhm.
But I also have to realize that I have to go past it. Like, you can't just be satisfied just because, "Oh, I got this award," right?
Yeah,
So
right.
if that kinda makes sense, you
It
know?
oh, completely, and yet I wanna stop you for a minute, and I want you
Yeah,
to reflect on the fact that, yes, I know that a leader in a team, there has to be a
yeah,
leader, right? And so, yes, it's all part of your team, but it's from your leadership that
right,
you could have even been nominated for this, because without you, the team wouldn't have been, because
right.
the team would not have been who they are at that time or were at that time if you
Yeah,
had not been who you were as a leader and still are. So, yes, when you look at it, just, you know, completely let it embody you, and
yeah.
yeah, it's your team, but you are the leader of that team, darling. Yeah,
Right,
absolutely,
yes,
right?
yes. Well,
Right?
it's like I told you from the beginning, Collie, it's tough
It's
to
tough.
shake the perfectionism and also the identity part of things too,
Yeah,
right? And
absolutely.
so, if you have any tips for me and for the listeners on, I'm sure that that's a much bigger thing than here's 5 things you can do,
Yeah,
but,
exactly, exactly. Well, yeah, the thing about identity is I find so fascinating is that, a lot of people don't realize that when you are at home, you know, in your house with a husband or with children, or when you're at work with your team, you know, members, or even when you're in a grocery store, we're it's not that we're schizophrenic. We're playing
yeah,
different roles, right? We're
that's
different
right.
identity. So, we have in that specific environment, we have certain skills and capabilities and values and beliefs, and that formulates the identities in that specific environment. A lot of people get confused by not being able to transfer out of
Yes.
that because they go, "Oh," because, it's like when I'm with my grandchildren, I'm not the same identity that I
Right,
am with
right.
you, right? I mean,
Yes.
hello, but I'm not
Yep.
schizophrenic,
Right.
right? But
Yep.
and that's not putting a bad taste about that
Mm.
condition, that medical condition. But all I'm saying is, yeah, it's the shifting in the perspective of that identity in different environments, right? So
Yeah,
you can, you.
and, even at home, you hit the nail on the head, Collie, because at home, I am a totally different person.
Mhm,
It's like when you go out, you put on that persona, right? And so the people that when I'm out and about, the Stacey that I am there
mhm,
is 100% different than the Stacey I am when I'm sitting at home on
yeah,
the couch with my family and my cats and, whatever
yeah,
the case is. And what I need to do is combine a little of the home Stacey with the Stacey that goes out, and I think that that would start,
mhm,
maybe solving some of the problems, but it's again, I think there was an expectation for so long of and, we sign an agreement when we start with the company, and it's
mhm,
basically you are always representing the company no matter
right.
what time of day, no matter what you're doing. So watch what you post on social media,
Yeah.
watch how you behave in public, and that sticks with you. And I
Oh,
think that
yeah.
when you get used to that and you do it for so long,
Yes.
that then when you're out of it and even being out of it for a year,
Mhm,
it's hard to switch modes. And the other thing that I'm gonna touch on, Collie, is that because of the way this thing happened with the layoffs with us,
mhm,
it was not on my own terms. I didn't get to
right,
end my career on my own terms.
right.
I didn't get to say goodbye to the viewers. None of us did, and that was the biggest thing, the
That's
biggest
so sad.
takeaway from all of us as a group was that we didn't get to say, have one last newscast and say, "Thank you for watching and listening," because it
Mhm.
was just everything was taken out from under us,
Yeah.
and we
It's
went as a
cruel.
yeah, and
Yeah.
we went as a group about a week or so after this happened because we all needed time to sort things out, and so as a group, we went out to Boston Pizza for lunch one day before everybody started parting ways, and the manager came over. And it's funny because we were sitting in the back booth. We had just reserved the biggest space, but I guess somebody had recognized, several of us, and she came over and she says, "Aren't you the crew from the TV station that was just laid off?" And we're like, "Yeah, yeah, that's us." And she was just like she said, "We're so upset. I watched the news all the time. My husband watched the news.
Mhm.
We always enjoyed the programming." And then she bought us all our lunch that day,
Oh my
which
gosh.
was yeah, it was
What a
just and there
beautiful
was
gift.
yeah, and there was like,
Yeah.
10 or 12 of us there. So, first of all, amazing that she did that.
Yeah.
But it was really kind of like the if I don't know how you put it, but like the seal on everything to know
Mhm.
that, yes, we were on the right track and what we were doing was completely valid.
Oh, for
And,
sure.
but again, it's not that full closure that you want.
No,
And I know I've looked in
thoughtful.
the employees from Medicine Hat, the TV station there said the same thing as well, where they didn't get that closure. They didn't get to say, "Hey, this is our last newscast. We
Yeah.
appreciate what you've done." And it's ripped away from the viewers too. Like,
Oh,
they're
yeah.
saying all of a sudden, why is there no TV station, right? Like, what's happened?
Just black.
Because even yeah, and I took a photo of the screen the day when I got home just so that I would have it and show because it said no programming available or something like that. And
Oh my god.
so yeah, but there was no explanation sent out to people. Like, there was calls thinking that it was a technical issue,
Of
like
course.
our service is out or something, right? So then, of course, when word got out to the community, and those first couple weeks, everywhere you went, if somebody knew you, that was the topic they were talking to you about. But yeah, it
Wow.
feels like I don't have closure because of the fact that I couldn't leave on my own terms, and that we weren't officially able to say thank you to the
Mhm.
people who watched us and supported us with advertising and, everything, because it was shut off. It was done.
Well,
So,
it's cruel, and, it kinda reminds me of, oh, in family constellation work and systemic trauma work,
yeah,
there's a thing called the bomb goes off,
yeah,
right? And
yes,
it the bomb drops in, like, it continues to drop in a family all the time when
yeah,
there's chaos in family, dysfunction in family, and people don't know it's coming back all the way back from when somebody in their family was actually in war, and then it's actually intergenerational trauma. So
mhm,
it reminds me of that. So what it would have done, probably to a lot of
yeah,
people, is re-triggered their DNA to just black, and it's like a bomb dropping, and it's like, "Oh my god, now what?" Right? We don't know
yeah.
where to go, we don't know what's going on. So it's very fear-based, and it's very cruel what they did. Very
Yeah,
cruel.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree, and the
yeah.
way that it was done was not the way it should have been done. Like I said, you
No.
don't put people in a room with a group of you who are being laid off and another group are not being laid off because there's
No.
still staff with the radio station here
Oh my
because
god.
they kept the radio station going. So you have not only traumatized the people who are being laid off, but like I said, have survivor's guilt, the ones who are still there. And,
Absolutely.
I've spoken with people because I'm still friends, obviously, with
Mhm.
most of the people who are at the radio station. And yeah, I mean, it was just as much of an effect on them too.
Of course.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know how it's normally done when they do
Right.
mass layoffs, but I don't think this was the way that it should have been done.
No, no, absolutely not. You know, I'm thinking in terms of we're gonna shift energy here,
Yeah.
because I know how much you love and save animals.
Yes.
And is there a connection for you between the work of rescuing
Mhm.
animals and the work you do now with people in transition?
There might be I didn't get into animal rescuing until probably, it was fairly recent. When I say
Mm,
recent, probably about the past decade
yeah,
is when
but
I
still.
started. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where it's helping those who can't help themselves. And it's not unlike sometimes what we did in journalism where we would do a story on someone who had been through something horrific and they had a GoFundMe set up, right?
Mhm,
So
mhm.
you're helping get the word out. And with animals, again, it's about feeling rewarded because you helped them out of a bad situation, right?
Right.
Or you don't know, and it's hard because we don't know what their stories is, and that to me, that's what I find out, or their stories are. That's what I find is the most difficult thing about being involved with rescue as a volunteer is that
Mhm.
animals can't tell you
No.
what their story was, but I see so many times where they are easy to forgive no matter what's happened to them,
Mhm.
and they can sense when a good person is there. right?
Mhm.
They know when you've come to help them. So is everything connected? Probably it's hard to really kind of sort it out, but
Mhm.
I would say, yeah, that it's all somehow connected in the grand scheme of things, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of definitions, like, I'm thinking in terms of defining the word resilience and not
Yeah.
as bouncing back, right? But
Right.
to how things were, but as growing forward into something entirely new. So
Yes.
what would that definition look like for you today?
Well, that's a really great question, Collie, because I think when you hear the term resilience, you often
Mhm.
think it's somebody who, as you said, has bounced back
Right,
from one thing, right?
right.
But I also think being resilient is having to constantly deal with change and pivot and try to keep moving forward because
Mhm.
you feel like you're knocked back and you're not where you want to be and you're thrown out of your orbit, but you have to find new ways to do things. So,
Right.
yeah, resilience to me now means a different thing exactly because of the reason, exactly because of what you said.
Yeah.
And it is for me now it looks like doing the best that I can with all the different things that I'm involved in, but always and I don't know that I'll ever be settled. It's going to be a difficult place to get
Mhm.
back to
Mhm.
be when I say settled, I mean where my brain is calm, where my body is calm, and I am not always thinking about what the next thing is going to be.
Yep.
And part of that, like you said, with the resilience, it definitely means something different to me now.
Mhm.
I feel like I have been resilient. I haven't just sat down and said, "Okay, well, I can't find anything, so I'm going to try and use the social welfare system and
Yeah.
just, take whatever money that you can get or however." I'm not even quite sure how that works, but it's just trying to keep going and find things and talk to people and get out there, and it is tiring. A lot of days
Oh.
it is tiring because you're also switching brains, right? So maybe the first half of my day I'm dealing with things with the community magazine, and then the next half of the day is the podcast, and then no days off. You know how it is,
No.
right? So even Saturdays and Sundays I'm up in my office because, oh yeah, this needs to be edited or this needs to be done. And when you're your own boss, it's
Mhm.
such a different thing. There's nothing that's categorized into, and yes, it was technically a Monday to Friday job being the news director, but you're never not connected. So there was always emails or something, on weekends or
Right.
evenings or whatever the case was, but it's still different.
Yeah, no, yeah.
And being your own boss is its whole other thing. And when you're trying to keep the wolf from the door,
Oh,
literally,
yeah.
resiliency, like I said, it definitely means something different to me now, and I keep pushing and keep going, and hopefully this is all going to come in a roundabout way, and I will people keep saying, it's in the end, you're gonna see it as a blessing, and I'm sure I will get to that point, but there's still a lot of anger for the way things
Mhm.
were happen, and
Yep.
again, I'm sure, Collie, that you have
Which is
dealt with
right. Which is
yeah,
right
that
to
you
have it. You
yeah,
need to
yeah,
feel it. Yep.
well, and when I told you about the fellow who came down and had the coffee with me and told me about, what he experienced, he said it was,
Mhm.
like, probably, I think, 10 years that it took him before he, could get rid of that anger.
Yeah.
So, it's only been a year for me, and
Yeah.
I will see things and there are triggers. There are certain things that trigger, and I then go right to that anger, and I'm trying to get better at that too, but as I explained, it's just so much that happened and the way that it happened and not being able to leave on my own terms, and,
Mhm.
you think about, "Oh, do I have enough in my savings?" And, all these things go through your head, right?
Oh,
So
yeah.
yeah, it's the anger, but the anger is also causing me to be resilient because I want to be successful. I
Yep.
don't want to think that what the people did to when I was a part of the layoff ended
Mhm.
me, right? I wanna
Right.
make
No,
sure
hell
that
no.
I'm
Yeah.
one up and at some point in my life, and this is probably not a good thing to say, but there's an opportunity for successful revenge, if that
Yeah.
makes sense, where I'm in a
Absolutely.
yeah, where I'm in a position and I can say, "Okay, you let me go, but look at me now," right?
Yeah, absolutely. The best
Yeah.
thing to deal with resentment and anger is revenge, successful
Yes.
revenge, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
absolutely. I was thinking in terms of if you could speak, right, to the you from
Mhm.
2 years ago, right?
Yeah.
The moment kinda before the shifts happened, right? What is the one thing that you would tell her that she wouldn't have to be able to hear back then?
I would have said, "Stop stressing so much." I had a couple of my staff members who said to me, and this was when we talked after the layoff, there
Mhm.
were several times when they thought that I was just gonna have a heart attack at my desk because of the amount of stress that kept being put on me, the more with less and, "Oh, we need you to do this report. Oh, yeah, we had it a month ago, but we forgot about it, and now you need to have it done by Friday."
Oh,
And,
right.
things like constantly happening, and there was
Mhm.
2 staff members that actually came to me and said that to me. And what you don't realize in the moment is that when you work for a big company, you are just a number on a line. You are, an item and that can be stroked off at any time, no matter
Yep,
how loyal you are.
yep.
And had I known how this was all going to play out, I would have been I wouldn't have been gotten so stressed out of, so many different things and always trying to work for the company and making sure that this was good and that was good. I
Mhm,
would have sat back and said, "Okay, they've taken away, our resources for this, so this is all we can do."
mhm,
Instead of pushing to try and do so much, I
mhm.
would have said to myself, "No, don't. It's not only gonna hurt you in the end,
Yep,
so just only do what you can do." That's exactly what I
exactly.
would.
Oh,
Yeah.
awesome, awesome. So our time's coming to a close here, but I just wanted to I could talk to you forever. I really could. I love it. So much to learn from you, Stacey, really. So finally, for anyone listening right now, who
Mhm.
is facing a cancellation, let's say
Yeah.
whether it's in wherever in their own life, right? Whether it's a job, a relationship, health crisis, what is the first smallest step they can take to start their own unexpected journey?
The first step, Collie, is talking to people who support you. And getting that reassurance, that helped so much.
Mhm,
Is there are certain staff members that I'm still friends with
mhm,
that talk to me and they just know the words to say to make you feel better in that
mhm,
situation,
mhm.
and that is your starting point. Talking to those who support you, and then moving on from there because you need that. If you are coming from a place where you think that you've got no support, you
Right?
can't be healthy for yourself. You can't
No.
have a healthy mind. You can't start doing what you need to do. And so having that support, and I thank to this day the people that stepped up and either emailed or called or, just and they know who they are and they know
Mhm.
what they said just to help you realize that, first of all, this had nothing to do with you. And in most cases, I'm sure it probably doesn't with people. It's, we see layoffs in all kinds of industries now.
Oh, yeah.
And secondly, use that support system. And even if it means reaching out to a counselor or somebody who, if you're really in a bad state, just to get that it's almost like validation that
Mhm.
you're still good. You're still in a good place no matter this is just a temporary setback. So
Yep.
that's exactly what I would say is use that support system as a starting point and then build from there.
Awesome, because you know what? In the end of it all, we're human beings,
Absolutely.
and we matter.
Yes. And
And
we're not always treated like that.
no,
So,
and we matter, and, we are enough, and we've always been enough, right? It's just
exactly.
all the other stuff that gets thrown on us.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. Oh my god, girl, this has been awesome. I'm gonna have you back again because there's way more I wanna go into, but,
Absolutely.
for
Anytime,
today,
Collie.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Stacey. And for people who wanna reach out to you, I
Yeah.
will be I will be posting your contact, but, I like for people to hear from you,
Mhm.
my guest, with your voice, how they can reach you.
Well, if they want to listen the first, podcast episodes, I'm gonna do Sunday and Wednesday releases, so there'll be
Okay,
new episodes every Sunday, Wednesday. The first release is July 19th, and
okay.
for that, just search Unexpected Journeys podcast on all the podcast sites and social media, it'll all be there, but also they can just reach out to me. personally, if
Mhm.
they want to be a guest or if they want to, any of the 500 other things that I'm doing
Yeah,
now.
exactly,
And
exactly.
like I said, Collie, you're going to be posting the contact information, but you can just
Yep.
email me. It's just my name, staceycomer@gmail.com. And
Okay.
correct spelling is STACEY and then COMMER@gmail.com. Feel free to send an email or find me on Facebook even and send me a message that way. My DMs are always open. Same with Instagram. And yeah, I'm always willing to chat and talk about new projects and always looking for guests on the podcast, of which you are going to be one. So I'm so excited. Thank you
So
for reciprocating
oh,
and joining
yes.
my podcast too.
Oh, absolutely. Oh my gosh, this is I'm so excited for you. Yeah, I just know the veil has been lifted and so much more is coming your way. Absolutely. So much
Thank you.
more. You
Thank
have
you.
no idea what's coming, but it's coming, girl. It's coming. So lots of love, and I'm so looking forward to talking with you tomorrow.
Sounds great. Thank you so
Okay.
much for having me, Collie.
Oh
I
yeah,
very much appreciate
absolutely.
it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great.